I'd like to start with a brief observation and a question for the participants and then a question for you. I'm sure many of you have noticed there has been a whole raft of videos online recently warning people away from orthodoxy. Most of them are coming from conservative Protestants of various sorts, evangelicals or like very cranky Calvinists and things of that sort, and a few from Roman Catholics, but there seems to be a growing air of desperation about these videos. You know, don't do that. Don't look at that man behind the curtain. That thing is not for you. And one of the interesting things that ties all of these together is this kind of thing that says essentially, well, even if you're dissatisfied with this or that tradition you grow up in, that can't be the right one because that's not American. That's not Western. You're a Western person. So even if you're unhappy with being Roman Catholic or Lutheran or whatever you might be, you can consider other options, but don't consider that one because that's an Eastern thing. That's alien. That's not you. And what's interesting about these videos is you look at the comments on them. I say, hey, great, keep them coming, because the comments are all saying, hey, I got to check this thing out. So this seems to be something of a trend. I don't know where it's going. I've noticed too, and maybe some people have noticed this in your parishes, that whereas most of the inquirers we tend to get over the years are maybe from a Protestant background, we seem to be getting more Roman Catholics these days. I don't know what that means. Who knows what goes on in the rest of the world, but they're continuing to come. And I'm just sort of wondering about how this all works, just in terms of a survey here. How many of you, I'm not asking about cradles versus converts, how many of you come from what we call the traditional Orthodox ethnic groups like Greeks, Serbs, Russians, Georgians, Romanians, whatever? How many of you are ethnics? Peter, you can raise your hand too. Okay. All right. So look, I mean, how many is that? That's fewer than 10 people in here, for goodness sake. So that means all the rest of you are people who have somehow, the ones of you are Orthodox, which I think is most of you, the rest of you have stumbled into this really alien, odd thing that is not supposed to be for you because it's some strange thing. And I'd like to explore that a little bit talking to Richard because, okay, here I am. I'm just a simple barefoot Greek boy. I've been here for 100 years, if you count my 4 grandparents from Sparta who came to America at the beginning of the 20th century. My parents were born here in a very, very assimilated American house, even though all of their parents were Greek. My father didn't even speak Greek at home because his parents had the attitude that we're an American now, we speak English here. So he didn't speak Greek well at all, though he could understand it. My parents never spoke Greek at home, except when they didn't want me and my brother to understand what they were talking about. And so over 100 years or so, I've assimilated to what is essentially for my ancestors a kind of a foreign identity. I go to Serbia, places like that. They say, "Oh, Jim, a Greek friend from America." I said, "No, I'm your American friend of Greek origin, of Greek ancestry, but I've been assimilated. I don't speak Greek. I understand a little bit. I speak more Spanish than I speak Greek, and so I'm not really an ethnic in that sort anymore. Except my name indicates that, and obviously I'm still Orthodox." So there's that sort of little bit of alien origin that still adheres to me. But see, the flip side of that is somebody like Richard. And that's the question I want to ask Richard. You can't get more American, more Southern than Richard. Yet here he is, and here a lot of you are, in this very odd place to be spiritually, historically, culturally, which is an orthodoxy. So I'd like to ask you not only how you came to it, but how you reconcile it with your American and Southern origins.
Jim, let me begin by saying, let's stop apologizing for being Russian Orthodox. I didn't join the church in this country. I joined the church at Optimapustin Monastery that's featured in the Brothers Karamazov. As a matter of fact, when the Soviet Union fell apart, they reconstructed the monastery based on the description of the monastery in the Brothers Karamazov. So let's stop apologizing, and I'm not apologizing for being Southern. I don't get my history from Wikipedia. Let's cut down the screen time and read books. And if you can't, I would recommend, particularly anybody under 30 here, and there are quite a few of you, Take an hour a day, early, 5 o'clock in the morning, 10 p.m. at night. Read for an hour. Read something you don't have to read. And if you can't do it for an hour, do it for 30 minutes. Get off the computer. With regard to videos, I think we're just bowing too much to the bitch goddesses of pop culture and pop history.
You're on the roll. Continue.
Well, I guess I was at a place I won't mention, probably in 2016 in the Middle East, because somebody would probably take an interest in it. And I was with a group of right parliamentarians, having been a parliamentarian, I guess, as a state legislator. And I met a lady from Russia and a Russian member of the Duma. And they casually said, well, if you're ever in Russia, why don't you come to the monastery at Optimopustin? And sure enough, I ended up there and went down there. And there was something about the spiritual power of the place. So if God smiles on you and you're fortunate enough to have the means to ever make a pilgrimage to Optimopustin, you should do it. I mean, this was the center of Russian Orthodoxy throughout the 19th century, all the way to the Bolshevik Revolution. And in 1993, how many of you know this? There were 3 monks were martyred by a Satanist with a ritual dagger. And that was the wellspring of the renewal of Orthodoxy in Russia.
Can you say a few words again about how it relates to your... In other words, did you not feel, though, that going in this direction, whether you call it Russian Orthodoxy, just Orthodoxy, that moving in that direction somehow was an abandonment of your own origins?
Well, by the way, I gave up, these are 35 years old, and I was an editor all the way up through when I was in the Reagan administration. And I gave these out. We don't have one for everybody, but we're just going to put them on the tables. And you can take them.
I get that one, right?
Yeah, you do. And this is about the neglected Southern monarch, the Church of St. Photos in Florida, St. Augustine. And it's an interesting history. I won't get off on that. But the question is wrong. That's yours. The question of, isn't it somehow bad to be Russian if you're American? That's like saying, well, we don't want to read Greek philosophers. We want to read Ralph Waldo Emerson. Nonsense. Emerson's garbage compared to Aristotle.
You didn't answer my question.
No, I don't think we should.
He's a good politician, isn't he? You don't answer. You say what you damn want to say. You don't answer the guy's question.
No, the question is, we are the personification. We are the personification of how Southern American culture is compatible with Russian Orthodoxy. We're it. It is compatible.
Well, how? Explain that. Again, your origin.
Your origins are very, very different. You grew up as Anglican, Episcopalian, correct? No?
Didn't we all?
No, some of us didn't. I raised my hand.
I used to call it the church. It was not always that way, but I used to call the Episcopal Church the church of what's happening now. You know, it develops the momentary man.
That was Flip Wilson. Remember that?
Well, maybe it did come from Flip Wilson. I don't know, after having denounced pop culture. But, yeah, I'm a recovering Episcopalian. And speaking of that, I did want to, when I was talking to the one English-speaking monk between in the forest in Optima, he was talking about Orthodoxy and the Optima elders, for which I took the name Ambrosi, one of the elders. And I was talking about T.S. Eliot. And I think there's a great deal of compatibility. And that's the only thing I actually wanted to read was an excerpt from Eliot's. Does anybody know what Little Gidding was? Anybody read it? All right, well, it was the return. By the way, it's Don Livingston. Dr. Don Livingston knows more about philosopher David Hume than Hume knew about himself. And he founded the Abbeville Institute, and I recommend all of you get online and go to the Abbeville Institute site. Don, thank you for doing. Thanks for getting me involved in the Ludwell Fellowship. Anyway, Eliot left Missouri. I think he went to Harvard and became a monarchist and a high churchman in England. And things actually didn't evolve the way Eliot thought they would. But his fourth quartet, Little Gidding, was about, in the 17th century, a return to monasticism. It was a form of monasticism in Cambridgeshire. And that, in that sense, is very similar to Opium Opustum. It's very removed, this idea. Pustum, means desert. You've got to be otherworldly. And so Little Gidding was. And I'm just going to give you one quote from Eliot's Little Gidding. With the drawing of this love and the voice of this calling, we shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all our exploring, we'll arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown, unremembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was at the beginning. Quick now, here, now, always, a condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything. And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, when the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crown knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one. I find that so compatible with Dostoevsky's feeling of the beauty of holiness. It's completely compatible.
Let me take issue with you on one point, and then follow up with a question. Because you said we shouldn't be ashamed of being Russian Orthodox and presumably Greek or Serbian or whatever it might be. And I don't think it's something to be ashamed of, but I think the point that I think Father Gabriel made is that you see Russian Orthodox Church on a sign, that means, okay, that ain't for me. Greek Orthodox Church, I ain't a Greek, I'm not a Russian, I'm not a Serb. And if you say Orthodox Christian, that even clarifies it more for people who, think we may be something else despite the cross on the priest's chest. And I guess my question is this. I like aesthetically onion domes as much as the next guy does. But to me, sometimes when you see something that is so outstandingly foreign looking, it almost comes across like a Sikh temple or something like that. And it's something you say, look how exotic. Now, I can understand, too, that part of our appeal, now let's take this back a few decades. If you go back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, even into the 60s in this country, when you had so many priests who were clean-shaven and wearing the minister suits and all that, because America wasn't quite as comfortable with other cultures, and especially immigrants, they wanted to fit in, they wanted to look respectable. And back then, Western clergymen were objects of respect, but not so much as they are today. So I can understand why they would want to look that way. But today, Americans want something that is different. In other words, since our, let's face it, our society is falling apart in many ways, people don't want same old, same old. They don't want to look at other traditions that may have been respectable in America a few decades ago, but are not respectable now. So actually looking somewhat foreign or somewhat different is maybe in our interest. But I wonder where the limit to that is, where it just looks like almost like a museum piece transported out of the old country somewhere. I'm just sort of wondering where that line is. To give an example, since after all, Orthodoxy came from the Greeks, when it went to these other countries like Serbia, Russia, Romania, it took on local roots, local cultural patterns. Even the tones of the music are very different from Greek tones. And we see some of this maybe on some levels in America today, like, Father Deacon Patrick here at St. John's Cathedral. On Meat Fair Sunday, they used to serve blini. Which makes no sense because you have that on Cheese Fair Sunday why would you have bleeding on Meat Fair Sunday? No, that's not the reason. What should you have if you're going to have something on Meat Fair Sunday in America? What? Chili. You have a chili cook-off. Now, that's Americanizing things a little bit, but that's a peripheral. Obviously, you're not doing things like in terms of liturgics that are going to be Americanized. Where do we draw a balance between being different enough for people to say this is worth checking out and not being too different that it looks like just some sort of exoticism? And where do we bring in American and even specifically Southern culture into the life of our church in a way that still maintains its Orthodox integrity?
You know, Jim, I'm old enough
I know, Joe.
to have known your mother,
Ah.
of blessed memory, Stella. And you talk about an Orthodox Joan of Arc.
Oh, yeah.
She was it, and she would have been on my side on this one.
Well,
I stand rebuked. My mom was take no prisoners, so I'm just a pale imitation. So where's the line though? How do we nativize Orthodoxy, but not lose what it's supposed to be?
Well, let's reject this bitch goddess of perfecting government in the state of Virginia.
I like the big goddess.
Yeah, I like the bitch goddess thing because it's out there, this idea of let me be blunt, if I haven't been blunt enough. We got a senator from my state named Lindsey Graham. And about 18 months ago, in a moment of weakness, I turned on CNN, and there was Lindsey with the president of Ukraine. And what did he say? He said, I tell you what, he said, you keep killing those Russians and we'll keep sending you money. Well, I mean, that's heresy. That's not Christian. It has nothing to do with the preaching of St. Paul. It has to do with Karl Marx and maybe Abraham Lincoln, but not St. Paul.
All right. Well, look, since you mentioned Linda Graham, let me raise another question. And that is, again, it relates to the foreignness of Orthodoxy in the perception of many people, and specifically this whole Russian thing. Some people are a little concerned about this in terms of what kind of scrutiny our church is going to be under. I mean, of course, somebody asked me today, who's the Fed around here? I said, this is Northern Virginia. Everybody's a Fed up here, and says you can't spot the glowy. They all glow,
Rebecca Dillingham told me to take off my glasses because I look like a Fed.
Yeah, well, there you go. Wait a minute. How does glasses make you look like a Fed?
They walk around with dark. I mean, and half of them,
dark glasses. Yeah,
I have been in charge of federal law enforcement, a force of 12,000 officers at the General Services Administration, which is now part of Homeland Security. And most of them don't know what they're doing. And I do not think we should live in fear of these perceptions.
No, you don't live in fear of them, but you do have to be aware of them. And you're right, the dark glasses probably don't do it, but the wire in your ear will tend to do that. It's like... But isn't there a legitimate concern? And we've seen this, like, for example, we saw under the Biden administration when conservative Roman Catholics were being under surveillance from the FBI. Do we have to not worry, but at least be aware of the fact that, at least in some sectors, being not only conservative Christian, but being tied to a church perceived as foreign, and even worse, a Russian church, is something that could be a problem for people. I mean, like, I don't know how many people here since we're not pointing the camera out toward the participants, how many people might be concerned, okay, if I tell people I'm applying for a certain job, maybe one connected with the government, one connected with a security clearance, maybe people are going to look askance at the place I go to church.
Well, I think you ask a fair question. And if I'm an Orthodox, if I pray to the Holy Theotokos to purify my heart, I'm not going to be afraid of what the U.S. government is going to do to me. I mean, that's maybe it's my age and situation, but no, I don't think we ought to live a life of fear. If we're Orthodox, we should be bold and no, as Ronald Reagan used to say, no pale pastels. And also, you need to understand the price of not doing something. I mean, Oliver Cromwell committed regicide and killed hundreds of thousands of people in England, but in Ireland, he exterminated almost half of the population. People like Lindsey Graham have exterminated 1.8 million people, mostly Orthodox Christian. And I think it's time for us to stand up against it. And that includes the Middle East.
Speaking of Cromwell, and of course, there was reference earlier to the murder of the imperial family in Russia. It's one of the constants of the revolutionary mind, and we see this in all the three great European revolutions, the English, the French, and the Russian, where the ultimate crime against the created order is regicide, where you take the visible symbol of God's authority in human affairs and you kill him. Maybe you can say a few words about King Charles. You it's a little off topic, but I think it's something that might be of interest to
I'll make
people.
a little bit of a confession. When we moved back from Washington, I was in Washington 25 years, and I was one involved in politics. My wife was kind of apolitical, and she ended up as chief of staff for Ronald Reagan for domestic policy, assistant secretary of the Army for George Bush Sr. And so we kind of got stuck up here. But when we went home, we bought a church because the Episcopal Church had gone woke. And we bought a church from the Baptist, built in 1879, and we called it the Chapel of St. Charles the Martyr. And my children are still Anglican, so we have the Feast of St. Charles the Martyr on January 30th every year. And I'm there. And quite a few Orthodox come from the Orthodox parishes in South Carolina.
And Roman Catholics come as well.
And Roman Catholics do come, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's strictly speaking Orthodox, but certainly.
You're coming next year.
Yeah, I am coming. Well, unless my bishop doesn't allow me to come, I don't know what he's going to say
these
about
bishops can forbid you to come a lot of places.
Well,
Jim.
that's true. Okay. Looks like I have a +1 for the visit there. Well, I think that's all I really had to say on this little Q&A here. What we could, you have something else to say?
I just
Rich?
want to thank my old friend Metropolitan Jonah. Where is he?
Right over there.
Oh, thank you.
Uncharacteristically
Thank
to
you
the,
for
to,
hosting
to the
this.
left.
It's been grand. And if there's a modern day St. Paul, you're St. Paul, not Billy Mahone.